And there it is up there. And as always, I wait for the little light to turn on to tell us that we are going live, but now there's the little meter bar. So if you're watching on YouTube as well, welcome, of course, Mitch Cammidge Coaching, the Savage in Business. And on my screen right there at that side is my brother from another mother, my great friend and well-noted speaker, author. I'd call him Lothario, but he's been in a committed relationship for years and years and years. I just think it's a cool word to use out loud. And that is Corey Poirier, the man himself. I've lost track of the number of books. I've lost track of the number of speaking engagements, but I do know that he is a consummate professional, a genius at what he does, and he continues to innovate and grow. And that's what makes our friendship so wonderful, because we get to share, trade ideas, and you know you're in the right circle when you are never the smartest person in the room. And every time I get a chance to talk to this man, it always reminds me of how many things I get to do, get to learn, and more importantly, get to share as well. So Corey, it is a real pleasure to see you, brother. Thank you so much. I'm going to be clicking a couple of buttons. I got 2 or 3 quick things to do, but why don't you fill everybody in while they're live, even though they're going to be watching this inside the influencer vault. So if they don't know who you are, wrong room, but why don't you fill somebody in really quick while I do the button clicking in the back end here for a moment. Let's do the basic name, rank, serial number, or why don't I just even do this? First question we've got earmarked for this because it's interview style from me to you, not the other way around. Can you tell us a bit about you and your background? How'd you get started and how did you get to where you're at right now?
Yeah, so I guess as far as my backstory goes back quite a ways. So I would say that I initially started as it's funny, I started my corporate career and I started as a salesperson selling photocopiers door to door. Now, when I say I started, obviously previous to that, I mean, I was born and all that kind of other good stuff. But what I mean is started my career. I really think it started back in my sales days because I learned so much about customers, about sales, about all that stuff as a salesperson selling, again, photocopiers door to door. And, Mitch, for me, I guess that whole world of selling copiers helped me get thicker skin, helped me face rejection, all these other things that probably wouldn't have happened had I not went down that path. And I stayed in that corporate world for about, I'm going to say 8 years. And then from there, I got tricked one night into performing stand-up comedy. And I fell for the trick. I performed. I went back week after week after week, bombed week after week after week. And in the comedy world, that's not a good word. I mean, we didn't do well. And but I kept going back and started getting excited about comedy. But then what happened was I was going and basically spending $10 in gas to get there, getting $5 from the door. And I realized this wasn't a really good business pattern. So I basically started going to see live speakers. And somebody told me, hey, can you believe Tony Robbins is getting paid to speak? And I said, record scratch, what, even people get paid to do this? And so what happened was I had been doing comedy. Now all of a sudden I found out there was this thing called speaking where you could get paid. I approached the local community college, convinced them to let me teach a sales course, taught the sales course. And then that evolved into my speaking career, which then evolved into ultimately people asking me how to get paid to speak. So I started teaching that. Then I landed 3 TED Talks. People started saying, how do I get a TED Talk? Started helping people do that. And then students from both my programs started saying, I wish you had a stage where people could speak about spirituality. And so I launched a thing called Blue Talks, which you're quite familiar with, which I've said is kind of a mix between Chicken Soup for the Soul and TEDx. If they got together and had a baby, we'd be that baby. And so that's Blue Talks. And then to bring us full circle, you mentioned the Influencer Vault. That's the newest, I'll call it maybe project, but that's the newest baby. And that's basically a monthly membership site where we ultimately help people up-level their influence by giving them access to opportunities to speak, to write, to get seen, get heard, all that kind of stuff. And then also let them sit in on interviews with some of the world's top thought leaders and ask them questions in real time. So that's me. And I guess, what was that, about 3 minutes, 4 minutes?
As I said, I thought you were going to be very succinct about this. Anyway, you said a few things that jumped out to me. And again, we prep for interviews. We don't just willy-nilly and go off. So I got a bunch of words up here, and occasionally my eyes are going to dart up here as well. You touched on a few topics that I want you to color in from the edges, if you will. first of all, when you talk about this, and I just decided to get on stage, and then I just decided to get 3 TEDx talks, and then I just decided to talk about spiritual healing, and then I just decided to do that. Well, nobody just decides to do that. They start ambitious. They start with a plan. But you mentioned about, getting your grooming in corporate life, starting photocopiers. Well, that's door to door. That is commercial and industrial sales. That is getting a door slammed in your face an awful lot. Time and again, we read here, and I certainly get a chance to talk about. You and I have talked about this in the past. There has to be a certain relentlessness that goes into entrepreneurship. Never mind. There has to be a certain level of disagreeableness. Sometimes people are going to tell you just can't do that, or you're not supposed to, or whatever it is, and you got to tell them to get stuffed, right? Also, you have to be able to leverage relationships. It's not just a matter of I've decided to do this. You have to influence people. You have to influence environments. You have to influence all these different things. So, in short, the words leverage, the words influence, the words relentless, and sometimes even disagreeable for people that spend their lives, for you, certainly making people feel better about themselves, or learning to magnify and enjoy life. There has to be a measure of that as well. So when I say leverage, when I say influence, how does influencing work? And you had to have a measure of relentlessness. In other words, the pursuit, like the Terminator in the movies, where it doesn't matter how many times you get shot, you're not going to go down, to keep doing what you're doing. Tell everybody else about what it takes for you to continue moving, because an awful lot of people fail or quit well before they get to anything like 3 TEDx talks and multiple best-selling books.
Yeah. So, so many great things to tackle there as well. I guess, how do you keep the persistence? So here's what I do, Mitch, is I actually go by, I'm going to call them reference points. And so I never had this when I started, obviously, but as I started doing 1 or 2 little things, if you've ever heard Steve Jobs talk about joining up the dots, basically, after you have a couple of little successes, all of a sudden you can go, you know what? I thought I couldn't do that. And then I did. And look what happened. And let's say, I'll give you an example. Like I go real world here. So I'll give you an example. Jack Canfield, who co-wrote and co-created Chicken Soup for the Soul. That was one of my first big interviews. And I had a podcast, Mitch, with 0 listeners when I approached Jack's office. Usually they like to hear a bigger number than that. I just started. He ended up being my 3rd guest. But when I reached out, they said it's probably going to be a no. So, they said he turns down 9 out of every 10 interviews right now because he doesn't have anything he's out there with, and he's taking a break. So they said it's going to be a no. It took 4 months. And what happened, because I checked in every month and they said, no, he doesn't have time right now. But I listened to this Success Magazine disc, CD, if people know what that is, in my car. And it was Darren Hardy interviewing a guy named Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach. And Dan Sullivan was talking about how he has a retreat every year, and Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen were 2 of his coaching clients. So then my little light bulb went off, and I said, okay, Dan talked about how he loves this type of interview. What if I could get Dan on my show for a similar interview, and he'd be a great guest? I knew that'd be even a big get on its own. But then maybe Dan will talk about Jack. And so I got Dan on, I brought up Jack, and he said, Corey, Jack would be a great fit for your show. So I took that clip and I sent it to Jack's office, and they said, even Dan, Jack's coach, thinks Jack should be on my show. And the next morning they came back and said, you beat us into submission. Jack will do the show. And I always like to finish the story off, Mitch, with a note. But the finish of that story is, what's really cool is the day my interview aired on my tiny little show, the day before he was on Larry King Live. The day after that, it was Super Soul Sunday with Oprah. And in between, it was us. We were the sandwich. And having said all that, to bring this back, because I want to give an example of how the persistence thing worked, is with Jack, basically, I just kept trying. But once I secured that changed everything, because I'm like, wow, wait a minute. If I could get an interview with Jack Canfield with a show that doesn't have any listeners, what else is possible? And so what I'm getting at here is I think we need to get some little wins really quickly, reward ourselves for those wins so we want more of them. And then when you have enough little wins stacked up, that seeing your wins and looking at your past and saying, look at all I did in the last year, is going to give you the juice to be persistent and get the next wins. So I use reference points. It's the same if I have a bad day, or if I have something that's bringing me down, I can look at somebody that said, you gave me the kick in the butt, I needed to go back to school, and now I run 3 car rental places. And I can think about a girl who reached out on LinkedIn to tell me that because I spoke at her high school. And I can think about that, Mitch, and it gets me in a better mood because I'm like, this is why I do what I do. So I don't know if that answered the question, but the persistence is being able to look back and say, you know what, I didn't think I could do that, and I did. And so the only difference between me who didn't do it and me who did is the me who did do it didn't take no for an answer, and I just kept pushing.
Fantastic. Corey, love it. Yeah, you answered it. You answered it very succinctly. So if we're listening to Corey right now and you're watching me, I got eyes bouncing around all over the place. So just know, to the audience out there, and especially those live on YouTube right now, that is me looking at, we got YouTube on the back end. I got a list of questions up over here. I got a couple of people bounce some questions at us as well, just making sure that everything fits in the right way so that we can maximize Corey's time. So with that, we talk about influencers and that relentless list. You put in some markers, some milestones, and you talk about little wins. I want you to expand on that a little bit, because after that, I'm going to ask you about lessons learned and some of the cool people that you've interviewed in the past, because that speaks to visibility. Okay. Now, it wasn't just the fact that, hey, so-and-so's coach said that you got to do this anyway. That wasn't it. It was the fact that you kept calling every week, every 10 days for 4 months straight that got you in the door. That's relentless. That's coming at something by the Terminator, and it landed you Jack Canfield. But
Absolutely.
it is a series of how many phone calls times how many months in a row for you to get there. Everybody goes, you landed Jack Canfield before you had a podcast at any listeners. That's fantastic. I'm going to land Jack Canfield. And then they call twice, and then they quit. Meanwhile, you called every 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is for 4 months. And then you got somebody else to leverage to get Jack in the door. That takes time and planning. So when we look at the people that you've interviewed, give us a list of some of the people and give us one lesson. So let's pick the 3 that stand out to you most in your head, or that your most cherished memories, and something you picked up from each of those, whether it was before, during, or after.
Wow, Mitch. So we didn't plan for the approach we're going to take. So I'm going to say, so just people know in real time, I'm going to be digging into my memory banks on this one, because of course, we didn't say this is what we're going to cover or anything like that. So I want people to know I have 3 planned, which is, I love that, because put me on the spot, Mitch. I love it. And so my thoughts around interviews that stood out and why and what I learned. So first one that stands out is an interview I did with a guy named Robin Sharma. And so those listening would, if they know Robin, they'd know him from probably his book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. 7 million copies sold. I think he has like 11 international bestsellers, but that's probably the biggest one. And so Robin was a big interview get, because I'm from the East Coast, and Robin was born in South Africa, I believe, but moved to the East Coast at age 1. And so interviewing him was a big get, but also on top of everything else, I ended up having a massive, the biggest I've ever had in my life, toothache during the interview. So I had to drink like gallons of water, because the only way it would stop killing me, the pain, was to drink water. And so I did. And of course, the new problem is I need to go to the bathroom like nobody's business. Couldn't speak up and say that. But the thing about it is, why that interview stuck out is because A, I had a toothache and needed to go to the bathroom. But B, even in spite of all that, I still remember almost everything he said. So you got to be really insightful for a person to be thinking about that and still take in most of what you said. So, but I want to give lessons. I don't want to just say, this was a great story about an interview. But the biggest lesson I recall from Robin, in terms of one he delivered, was a thing he said, I believe he attributed it to Warren Buffett. And basically, he said that we need to reverse engineer our lives. We need to look at what our life should be like and what we want it to be like when we're 80, sitting on a rocking chair, and then figure out all the things we have to do every year to get there. And so he actually mapped it out, like, here's the 5 things I have to do the first year. Here's the 5 things I have to do the next year. So this idea of reverse engineering your life, whether you do it reverse engineer a year at a time or your whole life, that was a really powerful takeaway for me. And, as a side note, a lot of people might not know this, but his first book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, he was a lawyer making a 6-figure income, decided it wasn't for him, printed this book at Kinko's, put 500 copies in the back of his car, and him and his father drove to Rotary meetings. He did talks, and they sold the books out of the back of the car. And how the book got picked up is he did a talk. There's a life lesson here. A talk at a Chapters bookstore. 3 people showed up. Now, if Robin did a talk at Chapters now, it would be probably 500. 3 people showed up, and he stayed there and he acted as if it was a million people. And one of those 3 people, his assistant, the guy's assistant, called Robin the next Tuesday and said, Mr. So-and-so wanted to schedule a meeting. And Robin said, oh, who is he? And she said he talked to you on Saturday at a chapters event. He didn't tell you? He's the publisher, HarperCollins. So he heard Robin's philosophy in the story. They picked up the book. The book's now, I think, 7 or 8 or 10 million copies sold. So, Mitch, there's so many lessons there, right? He showed up. He didn't leave because there was only 3 people. So Robin's interview, 2 ends. 1, reverse engineer is a great strategy we can use. But 2, you can learn a life lesson about showing up and being so good, as Steve Martin says, they can't ignore you. So I'll get to the other 2 more succinctly. Another interview that stands out to me, top of my head, since I mentioned him a minute ago, is Jack Canfield. But what he said in the interview that really stood out, a lot of people don't know that him and Mark sold the Chicken Soup for the Soul franchise. Like, they don't own it anymore. Yep. And he was sharing the story about how everything they did, they tied tithing to it, so giving away a percentage. And so when they sold the book series, of course, he had to write the biggest check he ever wrote, because it was still, still need to tithe from when you sell the book series. And he said it was probably the hardest check he ever had to write, signing a check, that big. And he said, but he knew he had to, it was the right thing to do. And he said, I thought, wow, I can't believe I'm writing this check. And he got contracts, I think it was within 3 weeks or 2 weeks, for speaking overseas that paid more than the check he wrote. And we talked about the idea that as long as you're not giving away expecting anything in return, more cases than not, it comes back to you. Mm-hmm. And so, the lesson about the fact that we need to give without expecting to receive, but most cases it's going to serve you anyway. And then I tie that into an interview I just did with a guy named Greg Reed, who shared the story with me that's related to that. And he talked about how one of his friends says, like, throwing money at a fan. And he said, when he's giving, tithing or whatever, he said, I could throw money at a fan, and no matter how many times I throw it, it blows back in my face. So every time he gives it away, it comes back again. And he can't say, I can't get rid of it. I throw it, it comes. I throw it, it comes. And it's a weird analogy because, it sounds like it's a negative. You're saying throw money at a fan or whatever. But if you think about it, it's very profound. It's like the idea that the universe will always give it back. So that was one. And then because I didn't name a female, I know that was kind of 3. I jumped between 2 there. But because I didn't name a female interview, I'd say Shailene Johnson. Or Shailene Johnson, the Turbo Jam creator. Yeah. Interview with her. She talked about how she had to choose who she was going to bring her Turbo Jam product to. And if you remember this, Mitch, Guthy Ranker used to be the big infomercial company. Yep. Beachbody was hardly a known thing at the time. And so she's dealing with both of them. And like she said, most people were telling her, you need to go with Guthy Ranker. They have all the money. But she said, my gut and instinct is telling me these guys here at the smaller company are going to work harder and work for me and all this stuff, like to make this product a success. So she went with her gut. And then she shared that every single time she's ever gone with her gut, it's always, even if it was like a big change in the universe, meaning Guthy Ranker gets overtaken eventually by Beachbody, that was a big change in the universe that nobody saw coming. And a lot of people call it the house that Shailene and Tony Horton built. Mm-hmm. And I would add even into that Sean T. But the point of it is, she talked about how so many of us ignore our gut, and yet it takes us down to peril. But imagine if we just listen to our gut and that little voice inside our head that says, this is the right people, rather than the voice that says, these guys have more money. And so, these are, again, top of mind. I'm jumping over, but those are some of the big ones. I would say they're takeaways. Reverse engineer your life as a summary. Show up and be all in and be so good they can't ignore you. Be willing to give to others because it'll come back to you. The fan analogy. And then the fact that you should listen to that little voice rather than ignoring it.
Interesting you bring that up because 2 weeks ago, I've got a little thing that goes off at noon on Fridays when we talk about the week that was in business. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about the difference between gut feeling, right? How that works, and the pace or the amount of time it took to make a wrong decision. And most people by feeling say that it takes longer to make a decision that you regret than it does to make a decision that you feel is the right one, because there's so much information being processed by your brain. Chances are it's mapped out something that seems most advantageous, most favorable, one that you like most of all. And yet the reason we get into trouble so often is because we tend to talk ourselves out of things as opposed to talk ourselves into things. What an extraordinary little piece of information. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for pulling it out of me, because like I said, I didn't think I would be jumping around. It's free, and so I went to the here's a good full circle or synchronicity, Mitch. I went with what my gut told me. I basically didn't go, okay, let's think about which ones I really love the most. I went, which ones pop into my head? And if they pop into my head, those are obviously the ones that were really meaningful.
Love it, love it. So we're talking about so much synchronicity. I'm going to get to some of the more meat and potatoes here in a moment, but this is busy. We celebrate little wins. We look at being relentless. We look at following our gut. We look at all these different things, which means that Corey's got an awful lot of stuff going on. How are you sorting that out? How do you handle that? How do you juggle that? Because a lot of people, again, quit because so much comes at people so often. And you talked about engineering it backwards. That interview with Robin Sharma, it's so wonderful to hear that, because time and again, people forget to, how does the analogy go? Fail to plan, plan to fail. How does Corey plan to succeed as opposed to plan to fail by failing to plan at all?
It's funny. I have a mastermind group that I facilitate every week. It's been going for like 5+ years. And one of the girls in there said, and I'll use a different word than she said, but she said, it always amazes me, your ability to get crap done. And she used a different word for crap. And she said, you need to name your book that. Now, a book did come out with that name on it after she said that. And I'm one of those people, I don't go, oh, crap, I could have used that name. I'm more like, it wasn't meant to be, because I was working on a different book. But the point of it is the idea of getting crap done. How do I do it? What I do a few different things. One of the things I do is I write everything down. And I hate writing everything down, Mitch. That's not who I am. I'm a, quote, if you look at the people like the analytical or the visionary, I'm not saying I'm a visionary in terms of calling myself that name, but that I would more relate to that idea, like just big picture stuff. So writing stuff down doesn't appeal to me. However, I've learned that I'm much more effective when I write stuff down. So what I do is I write stuff down that I have to do. And then I do the traditional easy system that we all know about, either 1, 2, 3 or ABC. What is the number one priority? What is the 2 priority? And what is really the priority that doesn't have to be ever done, but we put on there, which is the 3. And so to me, a 3 is the one that doesn't have to be done. 2 is the one that has to be done at some point, but it's not a rush. Or you could delegate it to somebody else. The 3, often you don't even have to delegate it. It just disappears usually. The 1 is the one that has to be done. So I focus on ones. What's the Pareto rule? Like 20% of your activity will result in 80% of your results. So I focus on getting more of those 20%. I try to find more and more ones. That's one thing I do. Second thing is I time block. So I'll work, like if I'm doing interviews, other than right now where I'm in kind of a launch mode, normally I'll do interviews on Tuesday. So that's a batch thing. Like Tuesdays, I do all the interviews. That's in my calendar. That's the day you can pick for interviews. And then if I was writing a book, I would decide in advance which day that is. And I would say if it's going to be a half day or full day, and I block it at that time. But then the smaller things, I block out time for, like returning messages to clients, following up with people, sales calls, whatever that looks like, I time block it. Even going back to my sales career, I would time block. I would say, okay, these 6 hours for cold calling, then 2 hours for paperwork. And so those are my 2 things I think that I would add, is that I separate the tasks and focus on the ones that have to get done. And then I time block so that I am not always just running around doing different things all the time.
So you talked about an awful lot of stuff that people should do to magnify themselves, but not everybody listening to this, or anybody that is listening to this, I should restate and say, isn't just here because they want to learn it the first time. They want to learn to be you. They want to learn to be something else. They want to be able to magnify or shine the spotlight on them. So when they do that, let's start with teaching, education, right? Nothing comes better in life than being able to educate ourselves. And at no time since the advent of this can it also come faster, hotter, or fresher than what we've got right now. In fact, people are watching live right now, and we've got people ping-ponging all over the place. The number of people we got concurrently live on YouTube, so it's fun to watch. So this means, that information comes hot and fresh, but it still means that ultimately maybe it comes like this, and you've written enough of these. And no, I don't mean moleskin notebooks. I mean books, right? What are your faves? What are the ones that people should look for? What are the ones that people should start to use to absorb and raise their level of education, but also to become experts for themselves? Because even if you're an expert to yourself, that's starting somewhere. But if you decide you want to leverage that and use it to help inspire and grow on others, what's the stuff people should take, plug into them, and what should they pick up to use?
So, when we talk about books that they should read, in my opinion, and here's the thing. Now we know that not everybody's going to pick up and read a physical book. So anything I say here as a read, I would translate as well into audiobook. Now I'm a physical book holding in my hand, but if you're an audio person, you can still get pretty much an audiobook for almost every book I'm going to mention. So whatever way you listen to it, some of the books that changed my life, and I recommend to everybody who will listen, one of them is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Mm-hmm. And that book is about the idea that, I'll give you an example. He said in the book, if you take two people and let's just say they both are eating a certain way. And let's say the one person on the right side eats super healthy, works out, does everything for 6 months. The other person does the exact opposite, doesn't work out, eats unhealthy, what have you, for 6 months. The difference in them in 6 months by just those daily activities, so every day ate healthy or every day ate crappy, they'll be more than a year apart. Like they'll be opposite ends of the spectrum, because what you do every day is going to compound. So in other words, if you're eating healthy every day in 6 months, you're going to be dramatically healthy versus that starting point. And then he gave the example of a penny. Most people, if you said, if I give you what I get after I compound a penny for 30 days, do you want that or do you want $1 million? 90% of the people say $1 million. But if you multiply that penny, compound it, it comes out to something like $3 million. So the book is about how to do little tiny small things every day. And again, he gave the example of working out. Like you're working out every day. It doesn't seem like much that one day, but over 6 months, you're going to be so far this way. And again, if you did the opposite, like, because you can go either way, right? If you do negative stuff for every day, small increments, it'll go in the opposite direction. So one guy could have a big gut, that didn't have it when he started, and the other person could have a six-pack, and all they did was daily activities. So The Compound Effect was a book that really changed the way I thought, because we always hear, what is the big things that you're doing to change everything? Well, what about the small things? Sometimes you can do a whole bunch of small things right instead of one big thing. So that's one book. Also, The One Thing, which is about just doing one thing, obviously, at a time. What is that one thing today that's going to knock down all the other dominoes? So that was a powerful book. Chalene Johnson's book, Push, was similar. So I guess in that same vein of what I'm talking about, you can pick one of those three books. Yeah. Chalene's Push goal, she said, is the goal that if you knock this one down, it'll conquer 5 other goals at once. So she said, figure out what the goals are, like writing a book that will now get you speaking gigs, media opportunities. Like that one goal will crush a lot of things. If I go old school, first book I ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People. I tell everybody they should read that book by Dale Carnegie. Second book I ever read was Think and Grow Rich. I tell everybody +1 they should read Think and Grow Rich. It's the book that changed my life. I also, another lesser known book by Dale Carnegie is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And then I'll give one more book, which is The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. Oh. And that's about, similar to Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. Club, it's about everything. You can do stuff in 1 hour before 8 o'clock that'll allow you to accomplish more than most people do all week. So I know, Mitch, you said books with an S, so I gave like 9 there. Hopefully that's cool.
Love it. Absolutely love it. All right. So we're going to go from there to strategies. So we sit there, we've got some information. People are going to pick it up. They're going to absorb it. They're going to get a hold of this thing. They're going to start digesting it over and over and over again, and not just watch cat videos on YouTube or not just watch the latest episode of Bad Batch, right? No. We're going to do some stuff that ends up fueling the mind, nourishing the soul, and making us better. So now we put basic fundamental advanced education into us. What do we do from there? What are the strategies to be able to leverage it or leverage ourselves in really busy spaces? And I'm talking about all of this. So we need to be able to, we've got some principles, representations to make sure to navigate and celebrate and acknowledge little wins, find the right compounding effect for ourselves on a day-to-day, the penny analogy, day over day, to have a sense of relentlessness and purpose in what we're doing, to look at the biggest wins as well. How many of those 20% markers as opposed to the 80% markers can we accomplish in a stated period of time? How well do we prioritize about what we're going to do? And based on what Shailene said, of course, conquer 5 things if you do one right the first time. Wonderful way to do it. Okay. So from there, what strategies now here do we need to start to use to accomplish or leverage what is a really busy space? Because everything I just alluded to, this here, Okay, you and I are in an interview. I got YouTube happening over here. I got somebody starting to comment right now. We got this thing, and I'm sure yours is going off as well. I got another screen with stuff over here. So me and you interviewing, I got 6 things going on to keep me on track to do this, right? So
Yeah.
how do we strategize to maximize this busy space and what's going on out there so that what we've absorbed here can start to become magnified, grow, create that sense of influencer?
So there's 2 parts I would go to there, Mitch. There's one, what can we do in terms of, like you say, strategy for how can we be, let's say, take advantage of this, what we have available to us from a point of view of being in the moment and capitalize on that. But then there's the other side you added about up-leveling as an influencer. So I kind of have 2 answers, because up-leveling as an influencer, I have a hack that I want to share with everybody today. And then the other side is some of the things that I do beyond what we talked about managing time. Is you said a key thing. You said, I'm sure your phone's going off. Yes and no. So the phone is on silent, so stuff's probably happening in the background. But one thing that I did a long time ago, and I've never regretted it, and I think a lot of people do this now, because who picks up a phone and calls anybody anymore? But one of the things that used to be a struggle is I had my phone on and I'd be with a client. I'd be, I just got to take this call, or I'm just going to send this to voicemail. And then at some point I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why is the phone interrupting me? So what I did was everything's on silence. It's on screensaver, so I can't even see what's happening. And then what I also do is I have, inside story, I have a call contact center. And I say contact center, they're more like a remote reception that does my phones, like handling the phones when I'm in meetings and all that stuff. So you get a live voice and my phone's not ringing and distracting me. So one of the things I do to make sure I take advantage of this, yes, I'm like you, I'm looking to try to share stuff and everything else when I'm on live like this. But what I'm getting at is the phone part. That's one thing a strategy I took that was really hard to do, break away from even just buzzing. Like, mine doesn't buzz, nothing. You don't hear my phone ever. And that was a hard thing to do, but it was a necessary thing to do. So that's one of the things I do to make myself more focused. Like I say, it's a little different when you're doing it live and you're trying to share it at the same time as you're on the interview. Having said that, I said I'd share strategy around how to up-level your influence. And so one of the things that I like to share with people, because I think it's low-hanging fruit with a big reward. And I'll say this, I don't think it's very often you can say something super easy to do, everybody could be doing it, and nobody is. Like, that's what you want to find, right? Because it's easy to do. And like I say, it's low-hanging fruit, but yet nobody's doing it, and it'll have a big reward. So what that is one of the things I recommend people do when they're starting out is, if we want to shorten the sales cycle, if you want to take advantage of doing something like we're doing right now, in my opinion, you need to have credibility. The more credibility you have, the more people are going to trust to come on and watch this live. The more people, when they're dealing with you, are going to say, you know what? This person's been vetted by others. I trust them because they were on this show, they did that. Then the sales cycle is going to be shorter. They're going to make decisions quicker. And again, they're going to listen more because they're going to see you more as the expert. So when it comes to up-leveling, here's something I think everybody could be doing quite easily that's listening right now that wants to be an influencer. It's a thing I call the as seen on banner. So, and we've all seen it. We might not know what the name is. And sometimes we've seen it and we don't even consciously know we've seen it. But you go to say, and I'll use the names again, but Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, JJ Virgin, Marianne Williamson. You go to their websites, I guarantee you, if I give you 100 names, 98 to 99 are going to have as seen on banners. Somewhere on their site, it's going to say as seen on the OWN network, as seen on Ellen, as seen on TEDx. Mitch, do you think it's a surprise that those influencers are doing it? How much money have they spent learning what works in marketing? And yet they're all doing one thing. But the interesting part is 90%, I would say, of the people who want to become influencers aren't doing it. But here's why I think that happens. Because they think it's hard. They're like, well, I'm not on Ellen yet. I can't do the banner. But who said the rules are you have to be an Ellen before you can do the banner? So here's a hack. There's a website called radioguestlist.com. And so this is going to cover off your two questions at once, because radioguestlist.com is a resource website where you can go there, sign up for free, and for their newsletter. And every day in your inbox, you'll get emails with 4 or 5 opportunities to be interviewed. Now, the great part is, from a credibility point of view, now you'll have interviews you can leverage and use. You can put them on websites. You can share them places. If a client says, Mitch, why should we work with you? I think you cover how to work on your business, and you covered that in an interview with me, you can say, here, check out this 10 minutes of this interview with Corey, and that'll tell you my approach to this. So now you've saved yourself having to explain it, but bigger than that, they're going to see it as more expertise because I'm asking you the questions in an interview. So back to the point though. So you can get on radioguestlist.com. Every day they'll send you 4 or 5 media or interview opportunities. So now in 10 business days, that means you have 50. What I'm suggesting is, even if you're a brand newbie, you're listening here, you're new, all you have to do is apply for those 5 every day. And I bet you in 10 days, you can get 10 interviews at a 50. Even if you're brand new, because these are people that are looking for, they're actively paying money in some cases to say, we're looking for a podcast guest. And so if you spend 10 days, you land 10 interviews. Because interviews are pre-recorded and we're talking 10 days, the interviews are only an hour or less each. I'm betting you could do those 10 interviews in the next 10 days. So now in a month, you've done 10 interviews and you ask those podcasters for their logos. You have 10 logos. You can now put on an SENON banner. And if you want to even pay somebody to do it, like Upwork, 99 Design, a freelancer, you can actually get it probably done for $25. So in less than a month, you can go from not having an SENON banner, even if you've never done one interview, to having an SENON banner designed for $25. And even time-wise, to apply for those 5 interviews every day is going to take you less than half hour. And to do the interview is going to be a half hour to an hour max. So even then you're talking what, like maybe 15 hours to have something on your website that when people go there, they're going to say, Mitch is the man. This guy, look, he's been everywhere. And the cool part is, finish story off, there's a 1.5 million podcasts in the world now. So because of that, most people don't know which podcasts are big and which are small. So they're not even going to pay attention. The logo to them, every logo is equal in a podcasting world. So they're just going to see that Mitch has been on shows, even if they never listen to the episodes. So that's a hack for how you can up-level your influence, in my opinion.
Badass, absolutely badass. So if you had to, what I loved is the list of questions we're working from right now too, because hey, it's an interview. Nothing is off the cuff. Some of this stuff is think about it ahead of time a little bit. If you had to start over, I'm hearing you say you got the hacks. If you had to start over, what is the very first thing you do? Wipe the slate clean.
Yeah, no, I love that question. John Lee Dumas on Entrepreneurs on Fire, or Entrepreneur on Fire. I always mix it up because he first started with an S and then got rid of the S. But John used to ask this question: if I took you and dropped you off in a new place you'd never been before, you have no contacts, you've no business left, you have a laptop and $500, what would you do? And I used to love that question. So similar in this situation, drop me off, start from scratch, new city, don't have any contacts, nothing. Even if you said I couldn't have any money, like nothing, first thing I would do is find local networking events and start connecting with people and build relationships with people. Because the thing it took me years to learn is everything is in the relationship. The relationships I have, I would say the currency is bigger than any amount of revenue I've earned in my business. And so what I would do is I would go to Rotaries, I would go to Toastmasters, I would literally say, what are all the meetings in town? And for a month, I would keep doing it, but for a month, I would just go all in. And then I'll add one caveat. What I would do is I would say, how can I help you? I would serve the people in those networking events. And ultimately, I would probably find the people that are the biggest influencers, and they would hopefully introduce me to other people that I need to know. But if you ask me, starting from scratch, what's the first thing I would do? I would start networking, basically.
Fantastic. So if we're going to start a networking, here's a great follow-up question then. If you're going to start networking, how do you increase that credibility quicker? We talked about your hack, but Corey, we've just wiped the slate clean. We've dropped you off in some Central or Eastern European country, and you can hardly even make yourself understood because they're not speaking English. You're there. That's it. Time to go make friends. So how are you going to leverage that credibility quicker? Networking is one thing. Currency and people, far bigger, far better. I talk about proximity mentorship an awful lot to business owners. But you're going to do that. How do you leverage that up, or how do you level that credibility up even faster, especially if you've got to start from scratch?
So this is going to sound strange because I'm also even adding in the fact that there's a language barrier because you added that component in. So if I'm adding that in, the one thing that you can see that a person does, even if you can't maybe communicate it, is random acts of kindness and positivity. And I know that sounds Heidi-flighty, but what I'm saying is when I said I would go into those networking events with the idea of how can I serve everybody in this room. So what I'm saying is if I would want to show them that I care. So random acts of kindness. For example, I'll give you an example, is let's just use the networking analogy. If I'm at a networking event and I talk to Mitch and he's the savage in business, and I just talked to Lucy who said, I'm just getting started in a business, I don't know what to do next. The first thing I'm going to do is bring Lucy over to Mitch. You need to meet Mitch. He can help you out. And so, but that to me is a random act of kindness. But when you're saying, how does that up level your influence? To me, when you go to those events and they start seeing Corey's the guy that listens and connects her with Mitch, you're going to become the expert, even though you're not going, look at how good I am. You know, it's like Napoleon Hill, since I mentioned Think and Grow Rich. Think about it. He interviewed thousands, well, hundreds, but thousands, I believe. I know he interviewed hundreds for the book. I don't know what he ultimately ended up interviewing, but let's say he interviewed thousands of people. At the end of the day, he was interviewing them and sharing their insight, but people still started saying, oh, Napoleon Hill's the expert. So what I'm saying is he made it about everybody else, and yet they still saw him as the expert because he was the connector. He was the person sharing the wisdom and insight. So what I'm saying is I would be the connector. I would be the random act of kindness guy. And you don't have to be a big influencer to be the connector. You just have to listen to what one person needs and say, I know the person that could do that.
Fantastic.
So that's what I would do, because then they would start saying, you got to go to Corey. This guy knows everybody. And then you become the influencer again.
All right, we're going to switch you back to real life here, Corey's life right now, how it's looking for, and to answer more questions, because you're giving great answers for people that are going to get started out. And the language barrier is never a barrier at all when you start speaking from a human kindness standpoint. One of the strangest things that people don't understand when they go to a networking event, the faster you ask people for their money, the less likely they are going to be to help you. The more frequently you ask people, how do I help you? The more likely you are to do what? Build relationships. The business is going to leverage on it. I'll always love that. So let's switch back to Corey's regular life, real life. We're here right now, and you're helping people. Strategies for getting more of those podcasts, strategies for getting more of those paid speaking gigs. Your direct business is helping people figure out how to do that. I've lost track of the number of people that haven't started anywhere yet. They're like, I'm going to be paid to be a professional speaker. Cool. What are you going to talk about? Don't have a clue. Who are you going to talk to? Don't know. What are you going to talk about? Meh. But I'm going to get paid to do it. Love it. Love the enthusiasm. Let's take that one step further. What are the strategies to get more paid gigs, virtual gigs? You talked about radioguestlist.com. All the years you and I have talked together, every time I'm writing notes while you and I are talking. And yet I'm thinking, I'm a clever dude. I got this figured out. You open your mouth and I'm like, I got to write this down. So what else do you got for us? Let's empty the tank out. Let's get more paid people. Let's get more virtual speaking gigs. Let's get more podcasts. How do we do that?
So I'm going to reveal a hack, Mitch, that I've delivered I maybe shared 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and maybe 2 times in my life before that, outside of my programs. So this is a hack inside the speaking program. It's one of the ones when people sign up for a program, they say that was worth the price of admission. So that's what I'm going to reveal here. So having said that, I think I shared this with you before, but you can correct me if I haven't. So here's the hack. If you're saying, how do I get paid to speak? And so I'm going to distinguish here, because this strategy will get you virtual and even probably paid virtual in the world we're in now, but it's not the most optimal strategy, because it's easier to get virtual. And there's a lot of other strategy you can use to get those easier. But I'm going to give you a strategy to get the paid, which is the harder part, get paid live talks. So, and they're coming back like, hardcore right now, paid live. So here's what you do. And I'm going to give you the websites again, but you go to espeakers.com. Now, again, there's probably other sites you can go to get this, but this is the one I found that works the best. So espeakers.com is kind of like the Association of Professional Speakers type hub, if you will. And so you go there acting as if you're the meeting planner. So you go to the espeakers.com, and there's going to be a drop down. I don't remember the name because I'm not looking at it right now, but something along the lines of find your next speaker, because you're trying to search as if you're looking for a speaker. Now, everything I'm about to share, you're not doing anything wrong. It's all public information, but it's just creative in how you're doing it. So you drop down, and let's use Mitch as the example. So let's say it was, you go into espeaker.com, you drop down looking for speakers, you go entrepreneurship. And let's say 100 speakers come up. So what you're doing is you actually search by category. You put the category, could be customer service, sales, but let's say we're going to entrepreneurship, and the first person that comes up is Mitch Cammidge. And let's say Mitch has been speaking for years, and that's his core business. And so what you want to do, first of all, with all the ones that come up, the majority of them will say how much they charge. This is important info because it tells you how much somebody paid them to speak, which will tell you probably how much they pay you to speak and how much you should be charging. for those clients. So what you're going to do though is you're going to take Mitch's name, open a separate window, go into Google, you're going to drop Mitch's name into Google. So really why you looked it up in eSpeakers is you just want to find the speakers to know how much they paid and what they speak on. And then you're going to open it up and go to Mitch's website. You're searching Mitch now. And if Mitch doesn't have a website or doesn't have this stuff, just go to the next one. But you go to Mitch's website and let's say it says testimonials, rave reviews, clients, what have you. But let's say testimonials. And you click there and Mitch has 100 testimonials listed. And let's say one is Bell Canada. So let's say it's Tony Smith, Director of Operations, Bell Canada. So that's what you see under Mitch page now on his client testimonial area. You're going to open your third and a final window. Now, everything I'm saying here might sound like a lot, but if you think about this, it'll take you minutes. And once you get to one page like Mitch's where there's 100 testimonials, you're going to stay there for a while. You're like what I'm sharing with you, this will fill your whole year prospecting with targeted clients. So the last window you opened was Tony, whatever I said her name was, I already forgot, but let's say it was Tony Spencer. You drop in her name, Bell Canada, Director of Operations, and the goal is you're trying to find out her contact info. So let's assume she's still there. Then you find her contact info. Then what you want to do is you want to email Tony Spencer and say, hi, Tony. My name is, well, we were talking, Mitch was the speaker. So let's say it's me. My name is Corey Poirier. I'm a multiple-time TEDx speaker. I speak on entrepreneurship and help clients with this. I'm curious if you ever bring in speakers to talk on entrepreneurship, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, I could take you through the whole thing, but obviously what you put in the message is important, but the bigger takeaway is you want to say, do you hire speakers? Now, 1 out of every 10, Mitch is probably going to say, no, we never hire speakers. You know they do, you saw it, but whatever, you move on. But think about what I just said there, because the point is you are now talking to targeted clients who hire speakers every year. You know how much they pay them, you know what they hire them to speak on, and you're directly talking to them. It took me 5 years to get what I could do in 6 months once I figured that out. Because what I was having to do is go, okay, well, I think Bell probably hires people. And then even just finding out who do you speak to at Bell? And then not only that, how do I get through to that person? Whereas by doing it the way I just said, this is the person that is in charge of meetings and you know their email address, you're already in. You've just skipped steps. So what you've done is you found the target clients, you know what they pay, you skipped all the steps. And then what I did when I first started is once I started doing this, I started doing this half a day. So if I was doing emails, that means I was sending like 40 to 50 emails a day doing this to targeted clients. You will get a lot better results per capita or per person if you pick up the phone. Email, you'll get lower results, but email, you can do a lot more of them in a short amount of time. So you have to decide what you're comfortable with. But here's the cool thing. If you want to put this on autopilot, you can even hire a VA and have them for 2 hours a day, send your emails to Tony Spencer. And I have a VA, for example, that charges $7 an hour. So, for what, $280 a month, you could have them reach out to 400 people who hire speakers to speak on what you speak on, and you know how much they charge. That's your hack for the day if you want to get paid speaking engagements.
Badass. So you mentioned it a few times, and I'm just going to throw something else in there too really quick. What is the fuss with TEDx and TED Talks? And of course, in this environment, it has to be about Blue Talks too, just a little bit, right? But what's the fuss with TEDx Talks, and why should anybody give a shit anymore? Why should anybody care?
All right. Well, and so I think we have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to give I'm going to go through both of them super quick, hyper speed. TEDx, why should you care? TED, why should you care? First of all, TED and TEDx are pretty close to the same thing. Here's the best comparison. It'd be like a McDonald's franchise and a McDonald's head office if they were across the street from each other. If you went in the restaurant, both would operate the same, but one's being operated by head office, one's being operated by a franchisee. TEDx is the franchisees all across the globe. TED is the main conference that's operated by head office. Why you should care is because to this day, and I've done a lot of things, nothing has moved the needle more than my TEDx talks because of the credibility that still comes with being a TEDx speaker. So it's the credibility you gain, and then on top of that, how you can leverage that credibility to open more doors for you. Even just the point that my closing ratio with TEDx talks, when clients are thinking of hiring me as a speaker, is 85%. It's a little less than 70 from my sizzle reel. So I can send them a TEDx talk that I don't have to touch up at all, do anything, and it closes higher than a sizzle reel we spend all kinds of money on. And I talk to clients, and the reason is because they know the TEDx wasn't edited. So they're like, this is really you, no edits. Over here, the sizzle reel, you're only going to show us the best of the best stuff. So they know that. And then, of course, the TEDx talk, they see that TEDx behind you. So it's the credibility from that. And then the Blue Talks. Blue Talks is a live speaking platform, a book series, podcast, and virtual event. And why you should care is because, like TEDx, it's going to give you that extra credibility and those platforms to share your message in a way that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So I think it's more of the same reason. It's just that Blue Talks is still building, and TEDx has that credibility that hasn't gone away.
Fantastic. So let's close this out. Part of the reason we're really here, the Influencer Vault. Why'd you decide to launch it? What can we expect out of it? And who are you trying to help and serve most of all? Influencer Vault, by the way, people watch for it and get inside if you want to hear and learn even more. And you want to see other people as well that Corey's been able to collect over the years. Collects them like cars or models, for crying out loud. You get a chance to see all those. But Influencer Vault, give us the skinny so that we can close out strong.
So Influencer Vault is a member site, Mitch, that I've been trying to create for a couple of years behind the scenes. My goal was, can I do something for under $50 to give what I would consider thousands of dollars in value to help people that would otherwise become influencers tomorrow, become influencers today. So I'm basically trying to help you get there sooner. How we do that is we have a curated list of ongoing opportunities. We only launched about 6 weeks ago. We're approaching 100 opportunities that you can apply for, like to speak on stages, writing. These are magazines that came to me and said, we're looking for writers. And so we connect you directly with them, or you can apply yourself depending on the way it's set up. So that's one thing. Second thing is, it's like the Netflix of personal development. So it's categorized. When you go inside there, you can see categories on podcasting, speaking, writing, all those areas we talked about. The third part is the live interviews, which is the part I get excited about. And to your point, this is when we bring on people like this Thursday, we have JJ Virgin. Next week, we have Les Brown. Week after that, we have Bob Proctor. Week after that, we have John Gray. You get to come on as a member and sit with them in real time and ask them questions in real time and basically learn the hacks from the people who have been doing it for, in some cases, 50 years and crushing it at the highest level. So to me, what we're doing is we're helping you get the opportunities and at the same time getting you ready for the opportunities while giving you the secrets to do it that much quicker. That's the member site. $44 a month Canadian, which works out to 35 US, basically $11 a week to get inside the minds of people like Bob Proctor.
Fantastic. Outstanding. Brother, this is Corey Poirier. This is the tables are turned for a change because this man has interviewed some of the most noted luminaries in this world. And it is a privilege and a pleasure, as always, to be able to share this time with you. For those that are live on YouTube right now, there's some comments. I wish we had a little more time to be able to let them come and answer it after, but I've got them here. I'm going to make sure to fire them off to Corey. And of course, you can follow up with him or myself. And after, watch for it. There's going to be the link attached here. It'll be right there with that YouTube video as well, to go and check out the Influencer Vault for yourself. Corey, thank you so much for being able to spend this time to be able to magnify and, of course, grow other people, because I know that your job isn't just to influence people because you want to get paid, but it's to make a difference in other people's lives. And it has been a privilege to share this time with you today. Mr. Corey Poirier, thank you so very much.
Feeling is 1,000% mutual, my friend. And let's call it a to be continued so we can tackle some of those questions later. But if you send them my way, I will individually tackle them too. Absolutely.
Corey, go get some. Everybody else out there in YouTube land and live, we will watch you the next time around. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, my brother Corey Poirier was here bringing the heat as always. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, everybody.